So I have a story to tell, but I wrote this really, really long version of it. And I was figuring it doesn't sound really good unless it's coming from the heart. So I found out my son almost died in 2007 from an incident that happened in 2003. Then that his mother hid from me, and I don't know how to deal with it when I found out in 2007. What I didn't know, what I did know was is there was years from 2002 till 2007 when I found out he almost died. I read a document that seemed very confusing to me, and it said that my son fell off one step. He fell down, hit his head, passed out, went limp, eyes went crossed, threw up, and held his breath. I read that document for the first time in 2007, and I said, "Oh my God," I cried. My son almost died of concussion. It's taken me 17 years to make a video about that, or make this about it. I've written about it so many times throughout the time. But what doesn't make sense to me is that a court reporter from Bucks County is the mother. And what I don't understand is all of her experience in court reporting and hearing from lawyers and doctors and her career as a independent court reporter and her knowledge of what happened. I don't understand that. So what I did in 2007 is I called the Pennsylvania Child Abuse Hotline, and I told them what this record said. So I sat there and was confused because when a baby who's 16 months old's head hits the ground and goes limp and passes out and throws up, that's a head concussion. That's not something to play around with. So I took that document and it festered inside of me. And I said, why? How? It's 2007. This document I have the document. It said all of those things I listed. I asked myself, and at the time, after I read it, I cried because I wasn't there. I had no idea what happened to my boy. But the mother had just begun working for, or hadn't gotten a job yet with Bucks County. It's as relevant because 4 years later, if I do the math right, 2007, 2003, I'm reading this and I'm saying, I was never told that the boy, 16 months old, hit the ground and laid there limp and passed out. The thing that struck me the most is the mother didn't call 911 first. So what I did is I started surveying strangers and coworkers and friends and acquaintances. I started to ask the question. I said, this can't be true. This is some sort of fallacy. As I read that, I pictured myself in that time, 4 years earlier, where the baby was, what happened to him, why did. But the bigger question that came to mind is what is it that caused her to not call 911? So what came out of it was the 600 people I've surveyed. I've asked them the same question. What would you do if you had a child who was 16 months old, who didn't walk yet, fell, hit his head, went limp, threw up, passed out, held his breath, cried? What's the first thing you do? The number one answer of the 600 people I've surveyed was you call 911. That's number one. That's been the number one answer. The second most popular out of the 600 people I've surveyed with that question, you pick the child up and you take them to the hospital. That was number two. 600 people, not one person said, call the pediatrician and make an appointment for later on that day. And that's what this woman did. I found out from a pediatrician's report that happened to my son. There's a near death. That is life threatening. His baby body shut down. And for 17 years, since I've called the Pennsylvania Child Abuse Hotline, they never called back. Why? Because the woman works for Bucks County as a court reporter for the judges. She's the girl that sits up front and takes the notes. So an official call, this was serious. A serious incident that happened to him that didn't happen for him in a serious manner. How do you, and of those people I've surveyed, and I don't know who can comment that I have asked, out of all the people never called a pediatrician first. That has never been a number one answer. So here's the document. But then here's the life-threatening thing. But then what happens out of that is no CT scan, no CAT scan, no MRI. We don't know where the damage is. We don't know what day it happened. We don't know how much of that is. Here's the important part. I call because I suspect, but this wasn't just a phone call that I called about. This was not just that incident, but there was a long 5 years worth of information that I learned about.